Take a good look at these images. The Moscow resident starts recording something impressive. Right in front, you can see a church with a golden dome. Everything is calm. But in the distance, on the horizon, a column of dark smoke is rising. And something is burning. Then, he zooms in with the camera. And this is when it gets impressive. Pay close attention to what appears in the middle of the fireball from the explosion. That thing being thrown up into the air is the entire top of a fuel tank. A lid that can weigh dozens of tons, and the explosion threw it into the sky as if it were a little coin. Can you imagine the force that's needed to do that? What you're seeing being swallowed by smoke and fire is one of the main refineries that supply Moscow. It's located in a neighborhood called Kaputinha. And alone, she supplies almost half of the fuel for the Russian capital. It wasn't just any building that burned. It's an essential artery. And it wasn't an accident. It was Ukraine. On purpose. Hundreds of kilometers from the border. When you understand what's behind this attack, you'll understand why Ukraine chose this target. But let me show you first what happened 3 days earlier. Kyiv. June 15th, 2026. This is the Pechersk Lavra, a monastery nearly 1,000 years old. One of the most sacred places in all of Orthodox Christianity. And it's on fire because Russia just attacked Ukraine's capital with 70 missiles and more than 600 drones in a single night. The fire engulfed the row of the main cathedral, the heart of the complex. More than 800 square meters burning. Monks and rescue teams formed a human chain, passing relics from hand to hand to save what they could before the flames arrived. At least 5 people died in the attacks that night in the Ukrainian capital. And here it's worth noting one detail, because it says a lot. When the world pointed the finger at Russia, do you know what they did? The Russian government denied it. They said the damage was caused by a Ukrainian defense missile that landed in the wrong place. The problem is that in the middle of the rubble of the mine, the remains of at least 2 Russian drones were found. The same type that Russia has been launching against Ukrainian cities almost every night for more than 4 years. But this story wasn't going to end there, because the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, went to the destroyed mine, looked at it, and made a promise. It wasn't a long speech, it was almost just one sentence. We don't want Ukraine to burn because of the enemy. But if Ukraine burns, your Moscow will burn too. Remember this phrase, because 3 days later it would turn into exactly that image you saw at the beginning. The Kyiv Refinery burns in the center of Moscow. But between Zelensky's promise and the fire in Moscow, there's something that almost no one took the time to understand. And that's where this story stops being about revenge and starts being about strategy. Because notice what Ukraine didn't do. They didn't respond by bombing a Russian cathedral. They didn't target a religious symbol to even the moral score. Would that have happened if it was just revenge? Blow for blow, church for church. Instead, Ukraine targeted refineries, fuel depots, pipelines, the energy infrastructure, At first glance, it seems almost like a weak answer. Exchange the symbolic weight of a cathedral for an oil tank, but that's exactly where those who look superficially make a mistake. Because this isn't an act of anger. It has a name. Ukraine calls this effort a logistical blockade. It's a program launched by the Ministry of Defense to systematically attack the Russian rear. The fuel, the transportation, the energy that sustains the front line. And the Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Mikhail Fedorov, said something that sums up the whole logic. He stated that you can already see a pattern in the data. The more Russian logistics are destroyed, the fewer attacks Russia can launch on the front line. It's not revenge, it's a plan. Ukraine found out it doesn't need to defeat the Russian army soldier by soldier. It can target what feeds that army. And what feeds that army, in the most literal sense possible, is oil. And have you ever stopped to think about why that is? Why specifically oil? Well, there are two answers to that. And the first one is about money. Russia is one of the 3 largest oil producers in the world, and that's not just an economic statistic. It's what pays for the war. Oil sales are the main source of foreign money coming into Russia, and it's largely this income that funds the war effort. Every barrel sold is ammunition bought. Every operating refinery means a soldier gets paid. Now, the West has tried to cut off this money for years with sanctions, and Russia has learned to bypass them. It created a fleet of ships with hidden owners. It changed flags. It set up shell companies. Sanction is just paper, and getting around those restrictions is quick and cheap. Here's where Ukraine's smart strategy comes in. There's a huge difference between a sanction and a drone. Changing a ship's flag is easy, but rebuilding a refinery, physically destroyed by fire and explosion, is slow. It's expensive, and due to the sanctions themselves, even imported parts to make the repairs are missing. In other words, Ukraine found the point where Russia can't cheat. You can get around a ban, you can't get around a crater, but cutting off the money is only half the blow. The other half is even more concrete. That's what's entering the average Russian's life now. Because oil is not just money. Refined oil is diesel, it's gasoline, it's kerosene, it's what powers the tank, the supply truck, the airplane. An army doesn't run on money in the tank. It runs on fuel. And this is where Ukraine's strategy leaves the spreadsheet and hits the streets. In occupied Crimea, the authorities installed by Russia have started rationing gasoline, 20 liters per person per day. Then, nothing at all. They only sold with coupons, lines stretched for kilometers. And in some cities, the sale of fuel was simply suspended for days. Imagine what that means. A territory that Russia controls, which was supposed to be a safe rear area distributing gasoline with a password, as if it were a time of famine. And it doesn't stop in Crimea. The Russian forces themselves admitted something that says it all. That the fuel trucks weren't able to reach the peninsula because the roads were within range of Ukrainian fire. The supply simply stopped. Not due to a lack of oil, but because transportation became too dangerous. Now connect this with the front line. The data from Ukraine shows a pattern. The more the logistics in the rear are destroyed, the less Russia is able to advance. And each meter becomes more expensive. In October of last year, the Russian army was losing about 67 soldiers for every square kilometer conquered. By April, it was already 179. Almost 3 times as many deaths for the same piece of ground. Without fuel flowing, the machine chokes. So think about the size of that. Revenue being cut off on one side. The movement blocked on the other side, both pillars at the same time. The question that remains is, how far can Ukraine push this strike? And the answer? Well, it came in just one night. Right in the place where Russia swore it was untouchable. Go back to Moscow. But now you already know what's at stake, right? On the night of June 17th to 18th, 3 days after the attack, Ukrainian drones did something that the Russian government insisted was impossible. The Russian capital is surrounded by 3 rings of air defense. Layer upon layer of missiles designed to shoot down anything that approaches the city. It is considered one of the most protected regions on the entire planet. And the drones got through. Look at this one. Filmed 16 kilometers from the Kremlin. Notice how he glides through the smoke while the defense rockets go up behind him. The refinery already in flames down there. And the drone just keeps going, diving into the target. Now, look at this scene. This is a Russian soldier on the side of a road on the outskirts of Moscow. He's trying to shoot down the drone with a shoulder-launched missile, one of those portable ones, and the drone was already practically on top of the target. It's the image of helplessness. All the layered defense paraphernalia reduced to a man pointing a tube at the sky, hoping. The column of smoke in the background already tells how it ended. The target was the Moscow refinery in Kyiv, the same one from the beginning of this video, the one that supplies almost half of the capital's fuel, and it wasn't the first time that week. It was the second time. The Russian press described it as the biggest attack on Moscow in 2 years. Ukrainian services reported at least 4 major fire outbreaks at the refinery. They hit storage tanks, a unit that processes crude oil, and another that treats diesel. And the result took over the sky. Look at the size of that black smoke cloud over the buildings of Moscow. But it didn't stop there. In neighborhoods northeast of the refinery, a fine dark drizzle began to fall. Residents filmed a black, oily coating on cars, windows, and clothes. A black rain. "This is hell. I've never felt so much terror," said a resident. For the first time, the war wasn't on television. It was falling from their sky. And it wasn't just the refinery. In the same operation, Ukraine hit an oil depot in a region called Rostov, used to supply Russia's military and transportation machine, and also a railway bridge in an occupied territory. Refinery, military depot, logistics, all in the same night. Logistical blockade in practice, in the heart of the enemy. And it was here that Zelensky called in the promise. He reminded them that he had warned them. The 3 defense rings would not shield Moscow. And he finished with the phrase that closed the cycle that began back at the Lavra. "If Ukraine burns, your Moscow burns too." Now, the part that supports all of this is not a dramatic image. It's the cold numbers, and they are heavy. Look, Russia's oil refining has dropped to its lowest level since 2009. Since the economic crisis a decade and a half ago, crude oil production has plummeted to its lowest level in an entire year, and Ukraine has already destroyed about a quarter of all of Russia's refining capacity. Yes, a quarter. Yes, a quarter. And there's the most revealing detail of all. Russia itself admitted it. The Russian Deputy Prime Minister, the one responsible for the energy sector, publicly acknowledged for the first time that production dropped because of the drone attacks. When the side that's taking the hits acknowledges the hit, you know the hit is real. So it goes back to the question from the beginning. How can a country that launches 600 drones in one night be rationing gasoline with coupons at the same time? Now you have the answer. They are 2 sides of the same war. The noise, the missiles, the drones, the burning cathedral, that's what shows up. And the silent suffocation, the idle refinery, the truck that doesn't arrive, the line at the gas station, that's what really decides things. And here is the deepest point of it all. Russia's greatest strength has always been its size. The world's largest country with vast territory, endless resources. But Ukraine figured out how to turn that size inside out. Too much territory means too many borders to defend. Too many refineries means too many targets to protect. When Ukraine's drones can fly hundreds of kilometers, the vastness of Russia ceases to be a shield, and it becomes a map full of targets that it doesn't have enough missiles to protect. The truth is that the giant is too big to cover its own body. Now, let's go back to that first night. The one at Lavra, the image that went around the world was of the cathedral in flames. Russia showing strength, attacking the oldest symbol of Ukrainian faith. It seemed like the gesture of someone in command. But maybe this image means the opposite of what it seems. Because those who need to burn a church to show they're strong are often the ones already being corroded from within. Russia still has the largest army, the largest arsenal, the largest territory. But while it was spending missiles on a 1,000-year-old monastery, Ukraine was quietly cutting off the only thing without which no army can move. The energy that moves this army, and the money that pays for it. On one side, a spectacle, Drones, missiles, a cathedral in flames. On the other hand, the silence of a refinery that stopped working. And this war, more and more, is being decided by silence, not by the spectacle. This won't stop here. Every week, Ukraine goes deeper, and Russia needs to spread out a defense that no longer covers everything. This is exactly the kind of story that I'll keep following closely here on the channel. So, if you really want to understand this war, and not just through the headlines, subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. Zelensky said he wants the average Russian to feel that it's Putin who is waging this war while the people pay the price. So I want to know your opinion. Do you believe that this strategy of suffocating the economy and leaving cities without fuel is enough to make the Russian people feel the weight of the war? Comment below what you think. See you in the next video.